34. Inbound Stevenson at the Ryan. There's a crash on the right shoulder. 48 minutes, 3:55 to Lakeshore Drive. Ryan is 22 minutes, 95 to downtown. I-57, 19 minutes, I-80 to the merge. Bishop 420. Northbound Tri-State delay started 87. I'm Chip Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Clouds will give way to some sun today, the high 48. Patchy clouds tonight, low 31. Sun and clouds, a mild day tomorrow, breezy and a high 51. Variable cloudiness on Wednesday, the high at 49. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
34 degrees at O'Hare, 38 Lakefront. Your next news update is at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy updating the situation with coronavirus and its spread. One question that is being asked and looking for a little bit of Monday morning quarterback was the U.S.'s decisions regarding the passengers on that Diamond Princess cruise ship that was held in Japan.
For 2 weeks.
For a couple weeks, right, Yokohama, outside Yokohama. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is respected across the board, he's the head of allergy and infectious diseases at NIH. He gave an interview to USA Today at the time. He was asked the question, was it a mistake to quarantine the passengers aboard the Diamond Princess? His response was, the original statement, which is not unreasonable, was that the best thing to do with these people is to keep them safely quarantined in an infection control manner on the ship. As it turned out, that was very ineffective in preventing the spread on the ship, so the quarantine process failed. I mean, I'd like to sugarcoat it and try to be diplomatic about it, but it failed. I mean, there were people getting infected on that ship, so something went awry in the process of quarantining on that ship. I don't know what it was, but a lot of people got infected, and that to some extent fed some irresponsible extrapolations by the press corps. But certainly now, a couple weeks removed from that interview, we have individuals who were infected, who were cruise ship passengers, who are speaking out. One was Carl Goldman, who wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, and he's in his late 60s. He said the sickest he ever was when he had bronchitis several years ago. This has been much easier, coronavirus. No chills, no body aches. I breathe easily. I don't have a stuffy nose. My chest feels tight, and I have coughing spells. But he adds, if I were at home with similar symptoms, I probably would have gone to work as usual. So, again, and this is not to say that people haven't gotten severely ill and died, because we know that's happened in Washington State.
2 deaths in Washington. 50-year-old and a 70-year-old, both men, both had underlying health conditions.
But you can't, right, and you can't look at an individual case and say that is indicative of all cases. You can't look at an individual situation like the cruise ship and say that's indicative of how the coronavirus spreads. It's more complicated.
Well, the State Department came finally after 2 weeks and took 300 Americans off that cruise ship. Half of them went to Travis Air Force Base. The other half went to Lackland Air Force Base outside of San Antonio. Yes, and you have but a little bit more of the science here. Some reports are suggesting the R0 value of coronavirus is, which is the value assigned to how contagious it is 3 or more, meaning one person affects 3 or more individuals. So that's fairly high. That suggests something highly contagious. But again, the severity is there's wide variance there. So there's reportedly a significant number of cases in Washington State. Mm-hmm. And they believe that it could have been there for 6 weeks.
And 2 deaths. However, most of the cases are asymptomatic with only slight symptoms. So what gives? There's all sorts of possibilities. People on the cruise ship were the Diamond Princess were hit especially hard. There are different strains of the virus that are circulating. Washington State local public health infrastructure has, in fact, been overwhelmed as of late. They initially thought it was just a very bad flu season. Many of the people who were on the cruise ship showed symptoms, thought they were supposed to, but were not actually so sick. Most of the detected cases on the cruise ship were, in fact, asymptomatic, but the media has been misreporting the extent of actual illness among the passengers. So, there's a lot of effort to draw sweeping conclusions from the cruise ship or from particular cases in particular states or particular countries, and it's just not that easy. But we have another case study to at least discuss to give you a sense of what happened with those cruise ship passengers and what our federal government's response has been. And to help us with that is Shelly Conlon. She and her husband Charles were on the Diamond Princess, and he was infected with the virus. He has been quarantined at Lackland Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas, where Shelly joins us. Shelly Conlon, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Shelly, are you there? Hello, Shelly.
Hello?
Oh, well, there we go. Thanks. Hi, Shelly. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Well, first things first, give us an update on the condition of your husband.
He's doing well. He was transferred to the Texas Center for Infectious Diseases Friday night because his test results came back positive. He's not really showing any symptoms, but that's where they take anybody whose test comes back positive.
And let's talk about, the night in question when they came and knocked on your door. Was it 1:30 in the morning?
Well, it was the first time they came was a little earlier, and it was, they wanted to move him right then. And my question was, why does it have to be now? Why can't it be in the morning? If I'm infected, I'm already infected, because it was disturbing. It was, 11:30 at night when they started all this, and we hadn't packed, we hadn't prepared, and they insisted that he leave then. I refused. The head of the CDC here at this location came back about an hour and a half later, and there was more conversation. He decided to go ahead and comply, but it seemed ridiculous.
Yeah.
Was
there a threat that they were going to, arrest him or handcuff him and take him out if he didn't comply?
No, there was no. Look, they forced us to come to quarantine. We had no choice, and there's all kinds of legal documents they gave us. There's other things they don't enforce here, so it's a little confusing. But no, it was more my resistance and questioning why it had to be done that got out of hand.
So give us a sense of the 2 weeks that you were outside of Yokohama and what kind of information you were getting from the cruise ship and the cruise ship from governments, maybe ours as well as others. Just so how were passengers brought along as this situation developed?
Well, we were supposed to disembark February 4th in Tokyo, which was Yokohama port. And we were notified that I think it was the evening before, that the Japanese government had come aboard and they were not going to allow us to disembark, that they were concerned about the coronavirus. And at that point, they basically took over the ship. So we didn't get a lot of information. In fact, they were monitoring and controlling any announcements that the captain gave us on the ship. So they immediately, I think it was that evening, started going room to room and taking temperatures and asking about symptoms. The challenge was a lot of the folks didn't speak English very well. So in the beginning, there was just chaos, trying to understand what's going on. What does this mean for us? Princess, I cannot say enough positive things about the Princess cruise people. They did their very best to try to communicate with us what was happening and what was next. But again, the Japanese government was controlling that.
And at what point did the CDC intercede? At what point did they show up on the scene?
I don't really know the answer to that question, because it's probably just a couple of days before we actually got off, because the U.S. government we didn't hear from the U.S. government, from the embassy or anything, for days. And then they started sending out emails to those that were on the ship, giving us updates, but they were very generalized updates.
Now, when you were on
And
the
they
ship for 2 weeks, didn't you have a slight fever, you and your husband?
We both, before all this, in the first part of the cruise, we both had sinus infections. We get those a couple times a year, so it was nothing for us. We just went to the ship's medic there and addressed the symptoms. But that was at the very beginning of the cruise.
And was there an announcement made about the decision that was clearly being debated, and there was an initial effective quarantine of 2 weeks, and then the decision, obviously, to evacuate the passengers, including you and your husband?
Right. We were notified just a day or two before that they were going to evacuate us. And with that notification, it was, I believe it was in bold print on the email, but they reiterated to us that anybody who showed symptoms or had a fever would not be able to board that flight back to the U.S. We would have to go to a Japanese hospital, which is what they were doing with other patients on the cruise, or passengers that became patients. If they had a temperature or showed symptoms, they were taken into Japanese hospitals.
And was were Japanese government officials administering the tests then?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And they controlled all of that.
So then on your flight to Lackland Air Force Base, were people diagnosed during the flight with coronavirus?
Yes. So although the State Department embassy told us over and over that no infectious people would be aboard this flight, there were people that were allowed to be on the flight. My understanding now that the CDC did not agree with this, but it was a State Department decision. So they had a temporary type, once this was decided, they built like these temporary big plastic rooms, I don't know how else to describe it, where they housed the people that they knew had tested positive or had fevers.
Yeah, that's actually Carl Goldman, who is the gentleman who wrote the op-ed in the Washington Post that I was referencing. He was one of them that was in the quarantined area on the cargo plane, but got on the plane.
Yes, they didn't tell us this till we got on the plane. We were all told there would not be any contagious people. Now, I understand why they did that. They wanted to get the Americans out of there. But many of us felt betrayed because we weren't told the truth. It was frightening to get on this cargo plane. It was not a typical airplane.
Right.
The cargo plane with makeshift seats that had been bolted down, and everybody out there's in hazmat suits, and you get on and there's boxes of food and this and that and temporary restrooms, and you're told to find a seat, and it's rather chaotic. So we didn't really know these people were on there or what that room was until after we started on the flight. And I think that was wrong. If they would just explain to us that they had an area, where these people were sequestered, and understand. Because at that point, we're hearing just nothing but negative news about this coronavirus and how contagious it is and how, the symptoms can be severe. So we were all a little concerned.
So today is 2 weeks, and most of the people there at Lackland Air Force Base are going to be leaving today. And what are they calling it? Operation Return Home?
Yes, Operation Return Home.
Have people started leaving the base already?
They're probably, at this point in time, still going through the process. They started at 6 a.m., and there's quite an ordeal of a process. They've got tables set up, and you can only go down there. They gave everybody wristbands, and you can only go down there at the time of your wristband, and then they give you have to put your luggage one place, and there's just various steps.
But most of the people that are being released were not tested for coronavirus, and I did not know. I thought since you went through all of this, 2 weeks on the ship, 2 weeks at Lackland Air Force Base, that it was mandatory for everyone to get tested for the coronavirus before they were released into the public and returned back home.
That was, but there are people here who have not been tested and who are leaving the base today. So I don't know the numbers. I know that there's 7 of us who will remain here because either our spouse or roommate are tested positive, and so that means our quarantine starts over. But not everybody has been tested. It was optional. We opted to be tested the very last day that was possible to be tested before people left, and that's when my husband was tested positive. But there's many people here, I don't know how many, but that opted not to be tested.
And both with respect to the Japanese government that assumed control of the ship initially, and then when the CDC officials arrived, in both instances, the testing was optional.
Somewhat. On the ship, they took more of a different approach. They took, first of all, anybody showing symptoms or who had a fever. The fever seems to be the basis for looking out for the symptoms. So if you had a fever, had symptoms, you were tested first by the Japanese government on the ship. Then they tried to, I think because of the volume of people, then they started testing anybody who was, I think it was 80 and older. So then they went around and tested those people. Then they went around and tested those 70 and over.
Right.
So that's how they approached it on the ship. Well, I'm 62, my husband's 63. By the time they got to us, it was the day we were leaving, actually boarding the ship. So they didn't test us. So we weren't tested on the ship.
Do you regret? Do you regret being tested? Because you said you wanted to be a
I don't regret being tested because we live in an over 55 community in Phoenix now. We moved from Chicago several years ago. We did not want to go back to that community if there was any chance that we had this virus. We did not. Most of those people are in their 70s and 80s. We did not want to be responsible for possibly giving them the virus.
Sure.
So we don't regret it. It's an inconvenience, but we don't regret it.
But there's one doctor from Phoenix who hasn't been tested because she needs to get back to her practice, and she's going to be seeing patients soon. And she could still be a carrier of the virus, but she didn't get tested.
There is a doctor here, and she's with her family, and she did decide not to be tested. She believes that symptoms would have been shown in the 14 days, which is the message that the CDC is telling everyone, that symptoms will show up in 14 days. However, I question that because here we've been all this time and we don't have symptoms, and he tested positive. I'm waiting for my test. I had to be retested. And there are people, we had friends from Canada that are in Japan in a hospital still because they tested positive and showed absolutely no symptoms.
And so even at this stage, even in this quarantine at U.S. Air Force Base, the testing is still optional.
That's correct.
Interesting. She is Shelly Conlon. She and her husband, Charles, who's from Arlington Heights, as I understand it.
Hersey High School grad.
Oh, there you go. All right, the Hersey connection, Hersey and Mafia. They are in Texas now, and hopefully Charles will get back to full strength very soon, and they can return to Phoenix. Shelly, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your experience. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelly. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
What gives one company the edge over another? Maybe it's not one thing. Maybe it's taking care of lots of things that help a business run smoothly. In other words, Cintas. Cintas has products that help your people stay safe and apparel programs that convey the right image. They service fire protection equipment, deliver and stock restroom supplies, and make sure facilities are clean and ready. Because when all those things work together, you're in business.
Oh, I'm ready!
Get Cintas and get ready for the workday.
You're probably not thinking about back to school season right now. In fact, most parents with kids in school are more likely to be thinking about spring break. But now's the best time to think about where you'll be sending your son or daughter to school this fall. It's a big decision, and you might have felt like private school simply wasn't in the budget for your family. Well, think again. We want to tell you about halfpriceschools.com. At halfpriceschools.com, you can find local private schools from all over Chicagoland offering vouchers for a full year of tuition at half the price with no catch. Find a school near you, purchase the tuition voucher, and prepare to send your child off to school this fall. It's that simple. Halfpriceschools.com has schools located across Chicagoland, including Westminster Christian in Elgin, Christian Liberty Academy in Arlington Heights, and Chicago Hope Academy on the near west side of the city. Make private school affordable for your family for the first time this year. These vouchers will sell out. Visit halfpriceschools.com today. That's halfpriceschools.com.
When it's cold outside, you can dress for it. But when your furnace gives out, hey, a blanket fort can only do so much.